Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. If you're new here, consider subscribing. It really helps keep these stories coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now sit back, relax, and let's get into the story. I didn't choose the island because it was romantic. I chose it because a line on the nautical chart showed 3,000 meters of cold, complicated water between its rocky coves and the mainland ferry dock, and because the resort brochure I found at the marina promised a water system buried under concrete and native stone. Back then, in the first week, we still believed in promises on glossy paper. We were carrying only what we could lift: tool bags, first aid duffels, fuel cans, coils of poly rope, and 2 boxes of seeds that would later mean more to us than the rifles. The map called the place Argo Bay Eco Resort. Our name for it, Fort Argo, came later, after the fence lines, after the watch rotations, after we started sleeping through the night again. I had served in a logistics unit before the world changed, moving pallets, slotting cargo into containers, making sure the right box met the right aircraft at the right hour. Those habits stayed with me: lists, redundancies, quiet planning. When the emergency broadcast went to a loop and the nearest city began to dim in bands, one substation at a time, I called the few people I trusted. We met at Pier 7 before dawn, with a breath of diesel in the air and gulls circling the last of the market stalls. "Ferry's still tied up," said May, the EMT, adjusting the strap of a rugged backpack. She was compact, resilient, the kind of person who never needed to announce competence. "Keys are in the guard room. I checked. No one's answering the channel." "Channel 16? asked Rafe, the waterworks technician. He could look at any pipe and tell you if it had been laid by someone who cared. 16 and 72, May said, and the harbour master's cell went to voicemail. "Then we go," I said. "Load and lash." The marina ferry, Haven 2, was a short, bluff-bowed workhorse with twin inboards and a steel ramp. We bolted on plywood to the gunnels, lashed the cargo with ratchet straps, and taped headlamps to our caps because the deck floods were out. I took the wheel with the VHF microphone clipped to my shirt. The channel hissed and muttered with distant voices, like a storm far from shore. The harbour peeled away, and with it that last shape of the old life. A row of restaurants with chairs stacked in windows and a chalkboard that still advertised oysters at 5. By the time we cleared the breakwater, the wind had freshened and I could see the darker seam where the outbound tide met our path. The chart plotter came alive long enough to give me a GPS fix. Then it went to a blank grey screen. I steered by instinct and by the pale cut in the water where the resort's old dock should be. We made Argo Bay with the engines humming evenly and the ramp clanked down against weathered timbers. The signboard above the pier said "Welcome" in sun-faded letters, and below it in smaller text. "Guests, please check in at the pavilion." No one checked us in. We were the only people on the island. We moved fast. Rafe brought the ferry's shore power cord up into a nest of breakers in the pavilion, shook his head at the dead panels, then jogged toward the maintenance shed. May went cabin to cabin with a headlamp and a notebook, marking cross symbols on doors where we'd stashed first aid caches. Noah, a calm-eyed former park ranger who had arrived with a recurve bow, walked the tree line with Alicia, an engineer who once designed rooftops and now evaluated lines of sight. They chose 2 high points for lookouts, a knuckled granite ridge above the cabins and an old observation deck near the island's south tip. We found the cisterns beneath a locked hatch behind the laundry. The lid rang under Rafe's crowbar. Inside lay a ladder slick with condensation and the cool smell of water and stone. He dropped a flashlight beam and we saw the meniscus. Dark, still, a full circle. We had water. The relief felt like heat in my chest. We had power too, if we worked for it. The resort's photovoltaic array, thin film panels strung in rows, sat on a bluff that faced east. Alicia wiped them down with microfiber and rainwater. We ran a line of MC4 connectors to the battery bank in the service room, The batteries were lithium iron phosphate, heavy, blue-cased, names like Valence and Battleborn printed on the sides. I'd only read about them before. Now we crimped lugs, tightened bus bars, and saw LEDs flicker. The inverter came up with a cheerful chirp and displayed 48.3 volts. We laughed, short, disbelieving laughs that sounded like coughs. That first day, we made decisions, not because we had authority, but because someone had to. We decided that the dock would carry a tyre barrier made from the old resort bicycles and truck inner tubes, that the main path would be raked clear for a line of sight, that we would close 2 cabins for quarantine space whether we liked it or not. And we decided that we would not be a fortress of 4 or 6. We would bring others carefully. By nightfall, we had a whiteboard propped in the mess hall, 3 walls of glass, 1 of stone, a view of the bay, and I wrote the first rules in block letters with a shaky hand. Quiet first, sound brings company. 1 radio on 16, 1 on the work channel. No boats uninspected, no exceptions. Hands washed, tools put back. Everyone learns 2 jobs. We rotated the watch in 4-hour blocks. The island smelled of cedar and salt. I took the midnight to 4 shift on the ridge platform with a hand-me-down thermal monocular and a thermos of tea. The world below me was a low-contrast watercolour. Cabins, paths, beach, the ferry tied with spring lines bow and stern. At 2 in the morning, a light blinked on the mainland shore. It could have been a porch, a car, a fire. It blinked again. 3 quick, 3 long, 3 quick, and I told myself it was only a reflection on a window somewhere. I said nothing to the others until morning. Then I mentioned it while we ate thin oatmeal, and May said, SOS, the letters soft as a lullaby. We were not warriors by nature. We became defenders by necessity and craft. We built a kiln by studying diagrams on a salvage phone with its brightness down to a sliver, fires in a U-shape, flue under an arch, the dimensions plotted with Alicia's tape measure. We made lime for mortar, we stacked stone, we framed a smokehouse from cedar and corrugated tin, dug a trench and set a small steel barrel into it, piped the smoke so the fish would cure in clean streams of cool air. Noah taught everyone how to set small game snares where the underbrush narrowed. Rafe drilled out a broken pump casing, then scavenged impellers from 2 failed units to create one that worked. The hiss of water returning to a spigot sounded like a song. We cut and filled. We built earth berms around the cabins most exposed to the shore, tamping soil until it held the shape we wanted. We planted in the lee of those berms. Potatoes first, because they forgive clumsy hands. Then carrots, beans, and kale. May set up a first aid station with labels printed in careful block letters. She trained us to use tourniquets and chest seals, even though the hope was not to need either. We planned for the worst, she said, so we have the luxury of being kind. The resort's old pavilion became our mess hall and council chamber. The windows there faced the harbour through a fringe of evergreen branches, and we could see any boat that turned into the bay. The ferry ramp stayed raised and chained every night. We kept the anchor light on, just bright enough to claim the dock as ours, just dim enough not to call. In the second week, we added people, a family of 3 in a skiff made from a canoe with a trolling motor clamped to the stern. Gordon with a greying beard, his wife Tasha with a careful voice, their daughter Emma, who asked questions that lay ahead of her years. They had a duffel of books and a solar lantern. We met them at the pier with masks and distance. We made quarantine rooms human, blankets, a potted basil plant, the kind of things that say you plan to see someone tomorrow as well as today. Then came the carpenters, seconded from a failed attempt at a mainland shelter, Ava and June, who could build a staircase that felt like it had always been there. They brought a shaper with spare cutters, chisels wrapped in old shirts, a willingness to teach. Soon 2 watchtowers rose, the ridge tower with a tarp roof that whispered under wind, and a second above the south cove with a view of kelp beds, where sea otters sometimes rolled on their backs like tourists. We settled into a rhythm. Morning checks, garden work, net mending, Fishing from the dock with a limit we agreed upon and respected. A workshop class most afternoons. Ropes and knots. Map reading. Safe handling of tools. And, when we had to discuss it, safe handling of firearms. The rifles we kept were basic and maintained. Semi-automatic carbines in 5.56, the kind you could feed with common magazines. A pair of 12-gauge pump shotguns for close work. A .22 rifle for quiet tasks and small game. We did not decorate them or talk about them as anything but tools. Each had a sling and a note card with a checklist: clean, rack, clear, store. No one ignored the note cards. The infected, some called them that, others used older words, were not a constant presence. They drifted along the shoreline at ebb tide sometimes, drawn by something or nothing. We learned that noise travelled across water like a rumour, quick and distorted. We learned that lights could be as dangerous as horns. At night, we used red headlamp filters and closed curtains on the harbour side of the mess hall. On the 12th day, some of us went ashore with the Haven 2 to gather supplies from a grocery 2 blocks inland from the marina. We left at first light, watched by 3 pairs of binoculars from our island. The ferry's engines warmed with a steady note. The radios checked. Haven to Fort, departing, I said. Alicia's voice came back from the ridge, concise. Fort copies, safe water, we'll keep a light. We nudged into the marina with fenders out and found a quiet that felt too big. We walked past posters in shop windows that still spoke of events that never happened. The grocery's sliding doors were propped with a broom. Inside, we split into teams. Food, cans first, tools, first aid, seeds. We moved with the discipline that makes scavenging less like panic and more like work. We left things we didn't need, so someone else might find them intact. A sign we wrote out and hung near the entrance that said, "Please take what you need. Return the favour where you can." May saw it and touched the corner of the card with her gloved fingertips. "We keep trying," she said. On the way back along the aisles, I heard the lightest footstep on tile. "Hello?" I said, with my hands visible. "We're leaving in 10 minutes. A boy stepped out from behind a display of pet food, a messenger bag across his chest. He was maybe 16. His hair needed a comb. He kept his eyes on my hands and the muzzle-down carbine slung at my side. "Is there a boat?" he asked. "There is," I said. "We can't promise a home without a quarantine. We can promise food and water and not being alone if you follow rules." He nodded once, the movement careful, as if he were agreeing to a contract. He had a name that seemed too formal for his age, Adrian, and math notebooks in his bag. He said he had been calculating how much rice he could eat per day if he wanted it to last until winter. "Let's talk about better math," I said, "like how many trellises we can make from the hardware aisle." We returned with the ferry's deck stacked in orderly rows, crates of supplies strapped to a welded rail, bags numbered and shaded beneath tarps. Back at Fort Argo, the ramp clanged down and the unloading ran like a line dance. Order does not make you safe, I thought, but it gives you a fighting chance. The first incident we recorded formally, we called the Night of the Gulls, because the birds were what warned us, hundreds of them lifting off the far cove at once, like a sheet of paper torn from a pad. The tripwire flares went off a beat later, low pops in the trees on the North Trail. Red lights slid over ferns and cedar trunks. We hit the drills we had rehearsed until they felt like muscle memory. Close and locked cabin doors. Centralized children and elders in the mess hall. 2-person teams to the towers, with radios clipped high, where the static of a chest would not swallow the signal. Noah was on the south tower. I took the ridge. I could see the trail where we had cleared undergrowth to thin, knee-high ferns. 3 figures stumbled through the flare light with the graceless sway we had come to recognize. Infected, slower than human, single-minded. We do not make stories of it. We record actions. We use shields and poles on the ground, not gunfire. Ava's idea. A technique adapted from long-ago earthwork crews that push stubborn stumps from holes. The pole teams worked together, quiet and clean. The 3 did not reach the cabins. We practiced afterwards without flares. in the dark, with headlamps turned away. Every repetition smoothed the edges of fear. We kept a ledger after that. A good ledger does not judge. It notes date, time, weather, action taken, lessons learned. Tripwire flares triggered at 0208. Team responded with poles and shields. No injuries. Poles effective in thin cover. Recommend more driftwood stakes at curve 3 of trail. We built more stakes. We adjusted the angle of the trail to lengthen the approach. We learned to love dirt the way a gardener does, for its honesty. It tells you what has passed if you bother to look. By the end of the 3rd week, the garden showed rows like lines of handwriting that had finally learned to be neat. The aquaponics bed, IBC totes under a frame of reclaimed cedar, circulated cleanly. Fingerling trout darted under the shade mats. Red wigglers turned scraps into castings, and Emma kept a clipboard of pH and ammonia, as if she were running a laboratory. Science, she said to anyone who looked skeptical, is not a luxury. Then she would add with a seriousness that adults often fear to show, it's how we make good bets. We were starting to talk about winter, about root cellars and windbreaks, and the caloric yield of beans per square meter, when the evening sky took on that peach gold glow that makes glass seem to float, and the flare lifted against it like a blossom. It rose from beyond the mainland point, a clean arc, then burst into red sparkles. Distress, Noah said from the tower, his voice level. That's a marine distress. Could be anyone, Alicia said from the radio table. Her fingers moved. She spun the dial and brought in voices, half words, clipped, a tone that raised the small hairs along my arms. Channel 16, she said, open. Then the voice came, clear and close, trained, the kind that knows how to stress the right syllable in an emergency. Vessel in sight, we are out of fuel, we have injured, requesting landing at your dock. Say again, I said, pressing the transmit key. Identify vessel. Silence for one long breath. 2. Then, we are the Starling, the voice said, searching. Fishing tender, 2 survivors. 1 needs medicine. May stood 1 step closer to the radio without speaking. Her eyes showed calculation and caution, nothing else. We can prepare quarantine, she said, but we need to control the approach. We control the approach, I said into the mic. Starling, you will hold at the outer buoy. We will bring you in with a line. Keep your engine off. Any weapons will be stowed before you cross our breakwater. Acknowledge. A pause. Then, acknowledged. We looked at one another. I could feel the gap between my shoulder blades as if the air itself were a weight. We all knew the story we were living, but we did not yet know the chapter. We staged as we had planned for visitors we did not trust, but could not ignore. The dock team wore gloves, masks, and eye protection, poles ready to keep distance. The hydraulic chain winch primed with the chain led under the pier to a hosepipe and back to a steel bollard we had added 2 days earlier because Rafe liked redundancies. On the ridge, the counter-sniper position was unrolled, a tarp, a rest, a set of optics. We would not fire unless someone else made us. The Starling slid into view as a low silhouette. Then the bow rose and fell on the swell, and I could make out 2 figures. One sat slumped near the cabin, a hood up, head bowed. The other stood at the wheel, one hand raised, posture open. He brought them to the buoy. We shot a messenger line and hauled in their painter. The chain winch rattled, the ferry's little hydraulic pump groaned, and the tender coasted the last meters without engine note, like a skater taken by the hand and guided to shore. Welcome, I said, the word honest and guarded at once. When you step onto our dock, you are under our rules. No weapons, no surprises. Understood, the standing man said. He was in his 30s, strong in that rope and salt way of people who work on the water. He had a small scar near his temple, and the kind of eyes that smile before the mouth does. I'm Dan, he said. He's Mark. He's been sick. The slumped figure lifted his head slowly. The movement was stiff, but not unfamiliar. A human can be stiff for many reasons. The light caught his face under the hood. I saw sweat, pallor, a pupillary reaction to the setting sun. I did not see the dead glass look we had all learned to fear. That meant nothing by itself. It told us to be cautious, not cruel. May stepped forward, one measured pace. "Dan," she said, "we're going to give Mark a mask and clean gloves. We need to see his eyes, the inside of his mouth, his nails. We'll ask questions. If this is illness we can help, we will. If this is something else, we will tell you quickly and kindly." Dan nodded. "Thank you," he said. He said it like someone who remembered how good a kind word can feel. We were 5 minutes into the intake when the first little sliver of wrongness glinted. It came from a place I wasn't watching, the ridge above the mainland point. A flash, then another, not sunlight on water, metal on glass. "Ridge," Alicia whispered into the handheld. "Do you see the east high ground?" "I do," Noah said, already shifting the big glass. "What is it?" May asked, still holding the penlight, still watching Mark's pupils. "Spotter with signal mirror," Noah said in my ear. "At least one, possibly two." My mouth was dry as I said to Dan, "Which harbour did you leave?" He answered too smoothly, the rehearsed line of someone who knew this question would be asked. "Port Edwards," he said. It was a real name for a real place, but it sat wrong in my ear. The tender's hull bore the city registration of a different port, and the life ring had yet another. A working boat can range far, mismatches happen, but this felt like a story built too quickly. I lifted one finger. "We're going to pause," I said. May's eyes flickered to mine, and I saw the thought cross her mind. "We have people at our back." "Fort," Noah said, the line of his voice too even, "because evenness is what you use when you need control. Look 3 degrees left of the mirror, above the spruce. That's a watch, not a reflection. And something else. A small boat tucked behind the cliff, stern toward open water." I breathed out through my nose and felt the world narrow from a landscape to a plan. "Dock team, step back 2 paces. Dan, hands where I can see them. Mark stays seated. No one moves fast." It happened like it always does, faster than you imagine, then in slow motion once you're inside it. Dan took 1/2 step as if to steady Mark. The movement would have been nothing, ordinary and kind, if his other hand hadn't cut toward the waistband of his jacket with the practiced motion of someone clearing a concealed knife. May saw it at the same instant I did. She had the calm of a medic and the reflexes of someone who had worked crowded scenes for years. Her hand snapped to her radio and keyed it twice, our silent alarm. The mess hall door rolled open on its track, and 2 of our people crossed the deck in a ready posture we would not apologize for later. Non-lethal tools visible first, shields, poles, lethal tools slung but not raised. Their eyes were quiet. They did not shout. "On the ridge," Noah whispered. "Look out at the mainland is on a radio. He's talking to someone on the water. I have a bead." "Hold," I said. "We keep the dock as safe as we can." May's penlight remained on Mark's face. "Mark," she said gently, "stay with me. Breathe in and out." Dan stepped back, slowly, hands open. Dan did not obey. He moved with speed and commitment, both hands flashing. The knife never cleared the jacket because his shoulder checked against one of our poles. The motion looked almost accidental, a bump at the wrong time. Except I'd seen that training. Redirect, control, make space. The knife clattered to the boards and skated toward the gap. He swore, a short, involuntary bark, and then the calm dropped from his face like a curtain pulled down too fast. The pretense was over. "From the ridge," Noah said in my ear. "Boat moving," and the crack of his carbine a half-second later sounded like a hammer striking a plank. It was a single, controlled shot. The lookout's radio tumbled from his hand into the ferns. At the dock, Dan lunged again with empty hands now, and I saw 3 shapes surge along the breakwater from the east cove. More of his crew, low and committed. We did not start this fight, but we had trained to finish it without drama. Warnings would only burn time and signal our fear. "Push left," I said softly, and the dock team moved like a hinge. Shields formed a wall. A pike found a stomach, not cruelly, not to damage, but to create space. Non-lethal when possible, targeted when required. The first attacker met a barrier he had not expected from islanders. He hit the boards with a breathless oof and a clean thud, then rolled as if surprised that the world had edges. The second grabbed the winch chain to swing aboard, and Rafe hit the hydraulic lever with his palm. The chain hummed, pulled, and the second man's stance went from confident to comic as the chain reeled him back toward his own boat like a hooked fish. "Right flank," Alicia said from the mess hall to the team inside, not to me, because she didn't need my permission for common sense. The door slid again. 2 more of us stepped out, and the deck ceased to feel like a place where we were reacting. It felt like something designed. "Mark," May said, voice still calm, still soft. "Hands on your knees. Look at me. You're safe if you stay still." The phrase was a habit from 100 ambulance runs. She didn't let herself stop using it just because the world had changed. Dan backed away, saw his plan fall apart, and made the mistake everyone makes when a script fails. He reached for a second script. He put his hands up and widened his eyes, as if the last 10 seconds had not happened in front of all of us. "We're desperate," he said, the words rounded and polished. "We needed honesty," I said. "We can still have it." From the ridge, Noah again. Movement on open water, small skiff, 2 in it, range 200. They're watching, not closing. "Copy," I said. "Keep glass on them." The skiff sat at the edge of the bay, like a period at the end of a sentence. Whoever sat in it would be the kind of person who likes to watch and not take risks. I didn't like that kind of person, not anymore. On the dock, we moved with care. We zip-tied wrists, not tight to injure, just to suggest that we were serious. We collected the knife, a cheap folder with a serrated edge that would have jammed on the first hard cut. We searched for needles, vials, powders, anything that matched the story of drugging someone to lower their guard. In Dan's pocket, we found a small aerosol bottle with a label half torn. Rafe sniffed it and wrinkled his nose. "Ethanol base," he said. "Maybe isopropyl, could be a sedative formulation." He capped it again like he was putting a venom back in its jar. "Where is your lookout?" I asked Dan. "Who is on your radio?" He stared back at me with the stubborn blank of a child who has decided that any answer is treason to a group. I recognized it because I had worn that look once, long ago. I felt something like pity for the Dan he might have been before a leader taught him that trust was a weakness. May exhaled. "Mark's fever is real," she said. "He could be ill with something ordinary. He could recover with fluids and rest, or it could progress. We can isolate. I recommend we do." "What about them?" Ava asked, chin flicking toward the restrained men. "We give them water," I said. "We treat injuries. We do not return their weapons. We put them in the quarantine cabin's front room, with the door open and a line of sight. We keep 2 people on watch, and we call a council tonight." That night, we sat in the mess hall with a map of our island and the bay spread across 2 tables, and a portable red lamp so we wouldn't advertise our gathering to any curious eyes across the water. The lamp made everyone look like they were in a dark room, developing a photograph of our own fate. Children slept in the bunk room under the loft with the white noise of a fan to keep their dreams light. "We can't keep accepting people if this is how the next ones arrive," June said. "We need an outer perimeter on the water, not just on the trails." "We have 1 ferry and 3 kayaks," Alicia said. "We can build a floating barrier, poly barrels, anchor chain, a couple of hinged sections we can swing open for friendly boats. We have chain, thanks to Rafe's hoarding instincts." "I prefer far-sighted," Rafe said. "We still need to deal with the men from the Starling," May said. Her hands were folded on the table, the fingers aligned like tools. "We can't keep them forever. If we drive them away, they'll lick their wounds and try again with friends. If we keep them, we take on management we don't need. I propose we feed them, treat them, and offer them a straight exchange. We release them without weapons in the morning, with a clear warning. No return is safe for them unless they come unarmed and honest. And Mark? Gordon asked from the end of the table, his voice careful. If he's sick with something not related to the outbreak, if he's just sick the old way, we can help him without endangering ourselves. But if he turns, he won't. Not here, not under my watch, May said, and the room went very quiet because the conviction in her voice filled it like a tide. I will sit with him. If he changes, I'll handle it without fear or anger. She didn't need to describe how. We didn't ask her to. What about the skiff? Noah said. The Watchers, they'll be back. They'll try a new script. We need to flip the script first. We did what our ledger taught us. We listed options, costs, benefits, and risks. Option 1, do nothing but strengthen defenses. Cost, time. Benefit, less immediate conflict. Risk, ceding initiative. Option 2, signal armistice. Invite talk at the outer buoy. Cost, time and risk of ambush. Benefit, possibility of reducing future attacks. Option 3, conduct a limited strike on their staging area at the mainland cove where the lookout had been. Cost, fuel, risk of injury, risk of noise. Benefit, disrupt their ability to observe and harass. We chose the practical hybrid, strengthen defenses and invite a controlled conversation under our terms, then hold a strike in reserve if they broke faith. The meeting for morning would be public and brief. Our rules would be simple and visible, posted on a plank at the outer buoy. No weapons in arm's reach. No more than 2 to a boat. No approach beyond the buoy until we invited it. Any breach, and we closed the barrier and turned away. Adrian, the math-minded boy who had begun measuring the world in rates and yields, raised his hand. I know I'm young, he said, but can I propose something about radios? Propose, I said. We can build a directional antenna, he said, pulling a diagram he'd sketched on graph paper. A simple Yagi. We can hear further without broadcasting as much. We can also point a second at the mainland to listen without inviting listeners to hear us. Alicia smiled, real and bright. Mentor, she said, nodding toward him. We have one. We added it to the plan, because this was how Fort Argo made plans. Each person added 1 stone to the wall and then handed the next person a trowel. We slept in shifts. I woke to gulls complaining at the morning light and the gentle clink of rigging at the dock. The ledger had a new line in May's pen. Marks fever down. Responds to questions. No worrying signs. Monitoring continues. At 8, we stood on the dock in view of the outer buoy, armed but not aggressive. The barrier wasn't built yet, but our bodies made a line. The sea lay pale blue-grey, like beaten metal. On the mainland point, the ferns stirred. We saw no mirror this time. A skiff nosed around the buoy. 2 figures, no boat name, no registration visible. They were dressed without logos. I doubted they had scraped them off. More likely, they had chosen plainness to be harder to track. The person in the bow lifted a hand. I'm Hale, the person said when they were close enough to speak without shouting. The voice could have belonged to any age. We had a miscommunication last night. Miscommunication is what people call it when they lie and get caught, Alicia said, too softly for them to hear. I gave her the ghost of a smile and stepped forward. You sent a distress flare, I said. Your people tried to board our dock. One of you had a drug bottle and a concealed blade. You had a lookout on the ridge with a radio. That's not a miscommunication. That's a tactic. Hale's mouth tightened a fraction. We tried to survive, they said. We thought you had more than you needed. Everyone thinks someone else has more, I said. Sometimes they're right. The difference between taking and asking is what keeps the future possible. We're not thieves, Hale said. We're a crew. We take care of our own. We won't apologize for that. Nor will we, I said. We have water, food in the ground, and rules. We will trade at the buoy for what we need and what you need. Tools, line, medical supplies if the case merits. You bring something worth offering, we'll talk. You come with tricks again, and we'll respond faster than last time. Hale turned their head slightly, as if listening to someone else. who was not visible. "What about our people?" they asked. "Dan, Mark." "They're alive," I said. "Mark is ill but stable. You can come back this evening with one person, unarmed, to take Dan. Mark stays. He's under medical care. He stays until he is well, or until we see signs that we cannot allow near our families. You will accept our decision." Hale's eyes moved like the eyes of a chess player mapping 2 moves ahead. "We don't accept terms when we don't set them." "Then don't come," I said. "The water is wide. The coast has many coves. We wish you no harm, but we will not invite it." Silence lay on the water between us, stretched tight but not broken. Hale's hand lifted. The skiff turned. They left without threat or promise. "Adrian," I said quietly, "build your antenna. If survival is a chain, each link must be examined. We built the barrier in 2 days with barrels and chain, and the kind of patience that looks like stubbornness from the outside. We rigged a swinging gate that one person could open with a lever and a counterweight. We tuned our radios to listen more than we spoke. We added a little shelf beside the mess hall door with a sign that read, 'Leave a thing, take a thing.' Bolts, washers, screws. It was a joke at first, then it became a ritual. Rituals are the glue of communities, even small practical ones." That evening, Hale returned with a partner in a boat that floated like a question mark. They came empty-handed and let us check their clothing for surprises without complaint. We walked them to the quarantine cabin's front room, where Dan sat on a simple chair with a chipped blue seat and a plastic cup of water on the table beside him. Mark lay on a cot behind a clear plastic barrier May had rigged from painter's sheeting and clamps. He looked better, less grey, more present. "You lied," Dan said to Hale before anyone else could speak, his tone sharp with the petty anger of someone who realizes he has lost status. "You said we would be inside the fence by dark." "I said we would be safe," Hale answered without heat. "You made it otherwise." Dan looked to me, then away. "You gonna keep us like trophies?" he asked. "No," I said. "We're going to send you away with a second chance to choose a different path." Hale looked at Mark. Their eyes softened in a way that told me deep down that there were lines drawn between them that had nothing to do with rank or tactics. Lines of loyalty and nights spent keeping watch with coffee gone cold. "What about him?" "He'll stay until he can walk off this island without falling down," May said. "He's not showing the signs we worry about most. Fever, dehydration, that's what we're dealing with. That I can handle. If that changes, we will handle that too." Hale nodded once, a gesture of real respect. "Thank you," they said. Then to Dan, with a coolness that suggested there would be another conversation later, "Let's go." They walked away with the gait of people who have kept their dignity by force of will. On the dock, Hale paused and turned back, eyes on me. "There are worse people than us on that shore," they said, "and worse nights than last night. You've built something here. They will smell it in the wind." "We know," I said. "We plan anyway. We never called it peace. We called it quiet, and the quiet lasted longer than I dared to hope. We used it well. We built the long-range antenna from Adrian's plan, and an aluminum boom we scavenged from a defunct wind vane, aligned it by ear and by a compass taped to a yardstick. We heard far voices then, some cracked with panic, some calm, some so tired they sounded like stones rolling in a river. We logged them and did not chase them. We learned weather again by feel and instrument, barometer falls, wind shifts, the smell that says rain is coming, even if the sky is too polite to announce it yet. We taught carpentry with Ava and June, first aid with May. She made us say care under pressure instead of the names we'd learned before, because words shape actions, and we needed our actions to be steady, not heroic. Alicia ran night classes in radios and maps, and Gordon tutored Emma and Adrian in algebra, because a future without math is a future that forgets how to build bridges. On the ridge, we extended the platform and added a tiny roof. We put a small plaque on one post. If you're reading this at 2 a.m., thank you for being here. We designated a patch of rocky ground as the Stone Garden for the ones we lost. The natural way of living and the new way both take their toll. We marked each stone simply. A name, a date, a phrase, not an epitaph, just a fact. Gave water, fixed pump 3, kept watch. We learned to mourn without stopping. Then the wind shifted one afternoon and carried a new smell, smoke with seasoning. Not the clean scent of a driftwood fire, the smell of oil burning, the kind that only comes from engines still hot or shops still full of grease and hope. Alicia swung the directional antenna. Hearing chatter, she said. New voices, organized, sounds like a convoy. We lifted binoculars and saw them. 3 boats in line, 2 low work skiffs, and a larger craft that might once have been a whale-watching boat. The flanks a patchwork of plates welded over old windows. At the bow, someone had mounted a piece of equipment that made my stomach tighten, a portable loudhailer wired to a car battery. Fort Argo, the loudhailer called when they were far enough out to be heard across the water. This is the Beacon Company. We maintain the East Channel. We help communities against the infected. We trade. We're not here to cause trouble. We know that name, Noah said, and his tone was the kind that one uses for a rumor that tastes like truth and ash. He handed me the binoculars. I saw their emblem once on a jacket at the marina a week before the fall. Sun symbol, looked friendly. The eyes above it did not. We did what we had done before. We gathered, not because we liked meetings, but because they kept us honest. Loudhailer says help, June said, but the boat is armored, and the engine note has that high whine of a tuned diesel. That's not a rescue, that's a show. Show or not, they have numbers, Rafe said, and they're calling themselves company, which means they think they're organized. Also means they want us to think we need protection, Alicia said, like a tax. I picked up the mic and made my voice friendly and unshakable. Beacon Company, I said, this is Fort Argo. State your intentions. Coordination, the loudhailer said. We are establishing safe corridors. If you sign on, you get access to our routes, our fuel dumps, our watch schedule. We ask a contribution from each community for the common good. How much of a contribution? I asked, already knowing I would not agree to it on a loudspeaker in front of our families. Half your excess, the voice said, on a schedule we set, in exchange for the service we provide. Define excess, Alicia murmured in my ear. I heard the smile that had no humor in it, and loved her for bringing the question anyway. We'll meet you at your buoy, I said. 1 boat, 2 people, no weapons. The pause lasted 2 beats. Then, agreed. We made ourselves ready again. Not a repetition of last time, but an evolution. Platforms manned, yes, but we also had a second line now. A set of drop nets rigged between pilings, released by a single rope if someone tried to drive forward. We had the barrier in place, and a person assigned to the lever. We had a second counter-sniper position on the South Cove we called the Cypress Post because we had learned that words make places real. 2 people from Beacon came to the buoy with the crisp posture of those who like to lead with their shoulders. Their uniforms were not uniforms, not exactly, but they matched in palette and attitude. They brought clipboards. The person who spoke, their patch read Sloan, gave me a smile that did not quite reach the eyes and held a hand out as if we had not been living without handshakes for a month. Welcome to our corner of order, Sloan said. We're glad to see you. We've kept a kind of order here without you, I said. Proposed terms. The terms were what we expected. Fuel, access to a channel free of floating debris, which they said they maintained, information about infected movements, and a promise that their patrols would respond to distress. In return, a share of our harvest, fish, cured meat, repair work, and the right to step onto our dock once a week for inspection and exchange. Inspection? May asked, the one word carrying a freight of polite disbelief. Standard safety, Sloan said smoothly. We check for unsafe practices. We don't want fires or illness spreading. Your concern for our safety is noted, I said, and the words felt like home, because where I had come from, we used phrases like that to smile while saying no. We will not accept inspection by any outside group. We will consider trade on specific items and exchange information case by case. We are not a client. We are a neighbor. Sloane's mask slipped just a fraction, enough to show what sat beneath it. Impatience. That's not how this works, they said, not unkindly, just with the weight of someone used to setting rules for others. There are infected hordes moving along the coast. There are groups who want what you have and will take it. If you're not with us, you will be alone when that happens. We are alone now, Alicia said softly, not as a rebuke, but as a statement of embarrassing fact. And we are still here. Sloane looked at the barrier gate, at the drop nets, at the ridge where a tarp moved and might be a person or might be the wind. They looked back at our faces and made a calculation I could not read. Then they nodded with almost theatrical good grace. We don't force compliance, they said, which made me wonder how many sentences they had learned by rote. But we remember friends, and we remember others. We'll be in the channel if you change your mind. They left with a wake that sent the buoy nodding. I felt the relief in the people around me like a pressure change, but I did not let my shoulders drop. I did not drop them the next day when we saw their larger boat in the distance again, or the day after when Hale's skiff ghosted along the far kelp line like a question, watching, always watching. The siege, when it came, was not a sudden storm. It was a dusk of small wrongnesses that built into evening. The gulls went quiet first, then the otters left the kelp beds. The air took on the stillness of a stage waiting for an actor. At 1900, Adrian, who had grown into the radio table as if it had been built for his elbows, said, "I'm hearing whispers on the work channels. They're speaking in half codes. Might be Beacon coordinating with unknowns." At 1930, a flare lifted far down the coast. Not a distress, but a signal. We wrote down its azimuth and distance and the wind, because that is what we do. At 2005, the outer buoy line dipped, just a little, as if brushed by something heavy below it. Rafe checked the lever line and found it smooth. At 2012, Noah called from the ridge. "I have multiple heat signatures in the tree line opposite the North Trail. Might be infected, might be humans." "Tripwire flares up?" I asked. "Affirm," he said. "And something else. I have glass on the east point, a reflection, low, deliberate." "Sloane?" Alicia asked, not because she knew, but because it helped to give a suspicion a name. "Could be any sun with a mirror," Noah said. "But the choreography smells like a rehearsal." At 2020, the tripwire flares popped in a line, like a run of firecrackers it got in slow motion. Red washed the ferns. 6 shapes stepped from the trees. They did not move like infected. They moved like people who had read a map of our island and chosen their routes accordingly. They carried shields of plywood and plastic. They were quiet. "Everyone to plan," I said, soft, and the mess hall door slid, and 2 of ours took the poles, 2 more took shields, and the rifle slings settled on shoulders with a gravity that did not feel like weight, but responsibility. The children moved into the safe room, with Emma's hand on the smallest shoulders. May checked her go bag, looked at me once, and moved to her post in the hallway where she could reach anyone in 20 seconds. The chain winch on the dock hummed as Rafe checked pressure. The drop net lines hung ready on their cleats. The barrier lever had a new sign above it: "Pull slow." This was not theatre. This was the choreography of people who took pride in work done right. The first group met our defensive trail like a tide meets a seawall. They probed, found the stakes we had set at odd angles, stepped back, and tried the next line. The second group, now visible at the South Trail, moved with more confidence, as if they had trained on something like our layout. That told us what we needed to know. The Beacon Company had been talking to someone, maybe many someones, about how to take places like ours. On the water, 3 boats came into view in the failing light, their engines low, wakes smooth as if stepped by careful feet. One made for the barrier gate. "We don't talk to loudhailers at night," Alicia said. "We don't debate our safety." "No debate," I said. "Gate closed, nets high." The lever went down in Rafe's hands, and the gate swung across the opening with a grace that would have made a bridge engineer proud. The skiff at the opening checked speed too late and bumped the chain. The sound was gut-edged metal, not dramatic, just real. The skiff turned a little too hard and presented its beam to the drop net. We did not drop it. We waited, because waiting is a tactic too. On the ridge, Noah exhaled slowly. Second group on the south trail using plywood to cover the stakes. They learned. "We learned too," June said and tugged a line. A deadfall we had built days before, not heavy enough to break, heavy enough to bruise, swept down across the path like a slow curtain. 2 plywood shields dropped. The figures behind them stumbled. The moment was not violent, it was decisive. Then a voice on the water, not from a loud hailer, but from the middle boat in the trio, the armoured one. "Fort Argo," it said, conversational, almost friendly. "This is Sloane. We're disappointed we couldn't come to agreement. We'll take a look around on our own." "No," I said, not with anger, just with the finality of a gate closing. "You won't." Sloane's boat eased forward, engines barely above idle, until it touched the barrier chain. The chain trembled and sang. On our dock, Rafe's fingers hovered over the lever for the drop nets. He looked at me. I shook my head once. Patience again. Let them declare themselves. On the North Trail, the first group made the tactical error of believing that quiet is the same as invisible. They reached the edge of the clearing, and our pole team stepped forward as one. The poles pressed, the shields tilted, and then the push was broken, and the first of the intruders fell back into the fern in a way that told me they did not expect resistance from a small island community, and now were adjusting to new information in a hurry. We pressed once more, not to chase, but to reclaim ground, then stepped back to our line. We had rehearsed that exact count of steps like a dance. On the water, Sloane's boat revved the engines once, then stopped. The silence afterward was louder than the engine had been. "You've built a smart place," Sloane said. "Smart places get attention." "We planned for that," I said. "Then plan for this," Sloane said, and the armoured boat reversed slowly, carefully, until it sat at exactly the place where the gate chain met the fixed line. A figure stepped to the bow and lowered something over the side. It was a hook. The chain made a sound like a low bell. Sloane's boat pulled. The chain sang higher. The gate protested. "Rafe," I said, and in that one word was an entire plan. He pulled the lever with a steady hand. The drop nets on the outside of the barrier fell as one, draping across the bow, and the prop of the forward skiff like kelp thickened to rope. The engine tone changed to a high whine and died. The skiff's bow dipped. The person on the bow grabbed for balance and found none. "On the ridge," Noah said. "Movement on the east point. A second group of humans stepping back. I think Hale's people are watching this like we are." His voice was soft, almost curious. "They're not moving to help either side." "Note it," I said. "Stay glassed." Sloane's boat cut its engine and let itself drift back like they were embarrassed to have tried something flashy and been caught out. They did not shout threats. They did not posture. They observed. They were professionals of a kind I recognized. Adaptive, unsentimental. That made them more dangerous than the desperate. "Fort Argo," Sloane said at last, voice even. "This is not the end of our conversation. We'll be back when the weather favors us." "The weather is our business," I said. "Not yours." They left. The humans on the trails slid back into the trees without the flares to light their backs. The gulls returned to the water and made their complaints. We stood for a long moment and counted breaths until our hearts matched the rhythm of the waves against the pilings. Then we moved again, because survival is a verb. We lifted the drop nets back into place. We inspected the chain and added a second safety line, because redundancies are love in disguise. We replaced stakes on the trails and added 2 we had been thinking about, but hadn't had time to drive. We made tea. "Do we expect them tomorrow?" Emma asked, eyes wide but steady. We expect them any day, Alicia said, which is why we'll sleep tonight. We did sleep because exhaustion makes error and error makes grief. But we didn't let the quiet convince us the chapter was over. We wrote the next pages ourselves. We sent a small team, Noah, Ava, and Adrian, who had grown faster at tying knots than anyone else, to the far side of the island by the sea cave. They launched the Haven 2 in the dark with covered lights, hugging the shadow of the cliff. They crossed to the mainland point where the watchers had stood and walked the ferns like gardeners checking for caterpillars. They found footprints, standard hiking soles, not military issue. They found a small cache wrapped in plastic and buried under a stump. 2 flares, a cheap radio, and a laminated sheet with a crude map of our island. The map was wrong in a dozen ways. The ridge tower was drawn on the south cove. The barrier was marked as rope. The mess hall was labelled storehouse. These are notes copied from a second-hand story, Noah said, photographing the pages with a phone that had become more notebook than device, not someone's own recon. Tells us they're spreading rumour maps to others. Let's make our own rumour, Ava said. She replaced the plastic-wrapped cache with a different bundle, 2 bolts that would rust quickly, a radio with a dead battery, and a new map with a single discouraging truth. Warning: strong currents. Landing dangerous. You can't control others, but you can control what they find. Back at Fort Argo, we doubled down on rituals. We held a council under a sky full of stars that looked close enough to sweep. We named our nights to keep memory. The night of mirrors for the first, the evening of chains for the second. We wrote lessons. Don't be tempted by pride. Useful is more valuable than impressive. Redundancy is not waste. Listen more than you speak. Make space to mourn and to mend. Mark stood in the mess hall doorway the following afternoon, with May's hand a feather on his elbow. His colour was back. He blinked at the light the way people do when they've been in bed too long. You ready to go home? May asked, and Mark laughed once in a way that meant what is home now. We put him on the outer dock and called Hale on the handheld with the smallest wattage. The directional antenna pointed like a finger. They came in a skiff with no emblems this time, and the kind of quiet that says a person has weighed options and chosen one for reasons they won't share. You treated him, Hale said. We don't forget that. Then remember this too, I said. When the beacon company comes with a bigger boat, as they will, with a louder voice and a friendlier script, don't be in their way. And don't stand behind us either. Stand aside and watch, then decide who you want to be. Hale looked at the ridge tower, at the barrier chain, at the garden where Emma and Adrian argued about bean spacing, as if the world had not trembled last night. You've built something that looks small from a distance, they said, and looks like a lighthouse up close. We want to be a good neighbour, I said. We're not trying to be a capital. Capitals happen to people who aren't trying, Hale said, and pushed off with an oar. I filed the sentence away because it was too neat, but I didn't forget the warning in it. In the weeks that followed, we transitioned from surviving to living, not all at once, and not in a way that would satisfy a storyteller who wants a clean arc, but in glances and gestures, laughter at the workshop table over a crooked touch-and-go joint that still fit, a fish pie shared because it had come out of the oven more lovely than any of us had a right to expect, a radio call from another island, a voice that said, "We heard of you, we have wind, we need batteries, and we can trade charts." We responded with care. We built a long-range antenna that could reach not only the closest communities, but those 2 coves away. We created a quiet code for distress different from the old world's, so we could know when a call came from someone who had spoken with someone we trusted. We sent out 2-person boats to scout other islands at dawn, never alone, never on the same schedule, 2 days running. In time, we sent a team to the lighthouse 5 miles south, a round tower on a rock like a knuckle, solar panels on a catwalk, a view 10 miles in any direction. It was full of the quiet of a place that had seen more history than people. We restored its battery bank with cells from the mainland small airport, a place that had become less a field and more a boneyard. We left a note on the tower's metal desk for anyone who could find it. Coordinates of safe water, names of groups who wouldn't harm you if you came hungry, and a sentence I still think about when the radio goes quiet. You are not alone unless you choose to be. We never wrote the end of the story with big letters. Fort Argo is not a fort in the old sense. It's a working place with the dignity that work gives a person. Our guardrails are built of the mistakes we survived and the habits we learned. We don't fly a flag. We do keep a light. A simple LED under a shield on the ridge tower, visible from the bay if you know where to look. An old harbour signal for safe approach. It is not a promise of protection. It is a promise of fairness. Sloane's people did return once more with a larger boat and a newer script. They offered joint patrols. They mentioned the word membership in a way that sounded like a net. We listened. We declined again. We weren't defiant. We were finished with being told who we should be by people who wanted a ledger to put us in. They left without incident, and I do not kid myself. Somewhere, a page with our name on it still exists, and someone is thinking of a way to turn us into a number. That's all right. Our numbers are our own. Bushels, kilowatt hours, litres, minutes of watch, names at the stone garden. I keep a second ledger with nothing but one-line memories. The night Noah told a joke so quietly over the radio that only the South Tower heard, and the laughter made us all feel less alone because the mic was still keyed. The afternoon Alicia fixed a frayed line while Emma lectured her on square knots with the solemnity of a professor. The morning May announced in the mess hall with a face stern enough to frighten us that we were out of coffee, and then smiled because she had hidden a little jar for a celebration that she said needed no reason other than that we had made it to today. On that day, we drank cups of coffee the size of kindness, and we stood under the pavilion roof as rain swept through and turned the world a single shade. We talked about the winter ahead and the spring after that, and the idea of building a pontoon walkway that might one day let children cross to the little rock of our South Cove without wet feet. We debated the weight limits of such a thing and whether it would hold in a storm. We put nothing to a vote that day. We didn't have to. We were already moving in the same direction. At night, when I take the 2 to 4 watch with the thermos and the quiet hum of the inverter somewhere below me, I put my hand to the ridge tower post and feel the solid warmth of wood that we raised from a stack of planks with bracing that has our fingerprints forever in its grain. I listen to the bay breathing. I sweep the horizon with the monocular. I catch sometimes the faintest blink of light from another island, one we've never met, one that found its own way to endure. I do not know if they are good or dangerous, kind or desperate. I only know that they are people. The ledger beside me on the shelf is open to a fresh page. I write tonight's notes in neat block letters because lists keep the world from sliding. Wind at 10-12, rain overnight, beacon traffic absent, hail skiff seen at distance, no approach, garden, beans flowering, fish count 21, batteries 51.2 V at sunset, 48.7 V at watch start, gate chain inspected, added second safety shackle, children, loud, then asleep, spirits, steady. I add one more line, not standard, because sometimes you have to write the truth in words you will understand later when memory is slippery. We are still here. And that, more than any tactic or tool, is our victory. Not a flag planted or a boundary enforced, not a fight won at dusk, but the steady act of waking, of tending, of mending, of telling one another across a table and a harbour and a season. We will keep the light, and we will do it together. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support keeps these creepypastas coming. Until next time, stay alert, stay safe, and never ignore the feeling that something is watching.